So let's walk through a clean install of Windows 10. Now, this installation is clean install, booting off of CD or other boot source, but we're using no automated scripts, no deployment tools. This is just a manual administrator installation of Windows 10. It's something that we'll do when we're doing one-off installations or very small installations. If we're using larger deployments and we're deploying, dozens or hundreds of Windows 10 machines at a time, it doesn't really make any sense to do it manually. It makes sense to use some of the additional deployment tools, using something like WDS or Configuration Manager or one of the other automated deployment toolkit tools, something like that. But for one-off installs, this actually works fairly well, even though it is a little bit more labor intensive. For a one-off install, that doesn't matter. Doing your bigger deployment installs requires more labor on the front end, but less time during the installation. This requires no real preparation on the front end, but the installation process itself does take a little bit longer. Okay, so we've booted off of the CD or whatever installation media source we're using, and it comes up and asks us which language to install, the time and currency format, and the keyboard or input method. So all these are default to US English. We're good with that, so we're going to click Next. And then the install now is going to begin the installation. We also have this little option down here to repair your computer. This gives us access to some recovery tools that are on the CD. So if we have a corrupted operating system, we can boot off of the CD just like we were doing a regular setup, except that instead of doing the setup, we can come here and do some of the repair tools and see if we can recover the operating system. That's not what we're doing here, though. We're doing a clean install, so I'm going to do install now. Now, booting off the CD is something we're going to do if we're doing a clean install, which means no preserving anything from the previous operating system, or better yet, no previous operating system in existence. If we were trying to upgrade the operating system, then what we would do is we would run the installation from inside the existing operating system. So if we had Windows 8 and we were upgrading it to Windows 10, first off, we have to make sure that we can upgrade the additions that we're doing. But if we can, then we boot that Windows 10 CD or whatever the boot source is in Windows 8, and then we would have the option to do an upgrade. So Windows setup, yeah, we accept the terms of the license agreement, and we click Next. Now, if we don't do it that way, we can still do, if we boot off the CD directly, we can still do an upgrade install from here. My preference is to do it from inside the operating system if at all possible. But if for some reason we can't, or we don't because we just booted off the CD and it came, this will allow us to do the upgrade as well. So in the upgrade, the file settings applications from the previous operating system are preserved. In a custom installation or a clean install or fresh install, then we don't try to preserve anything. Now, if it sees an existing Windows operating system, it will install parallel to it. So unless you tell it to in a couple of other screens, it won't wipe out the hard drive. So you can still sometimes protect your data, but all of your configurations will be gone because it'll be a clean install of Windows. It'll just be parallel in a parallel folder to the existing Windows install. So since we're doing a clean install, we're going to do custom. Now we have unallocated drive space. So this is a brand new drive, right? I've got nothing on here. This is a brand new fresh install. And it'll detect all of the drives. And now at this point, we have a couple of options. First issue, if it doesn't detect a drive, and that's going to be pretty rare. If we have a drive in and it's powered up and it's connected and everything is fine, then it's going to be pretty rare that it doesn't detect it. However, if we're using an off-the-wall hard drive controller, and the times that I have seen this most is if I'm using a third-party RAID controller or something like that Windows doesn't have a built-in driver for, then I can come down here and I can go to load the driver. And so I load the driver and then it rescans, and hopefully at that point it detects the hard drive. And that's the experience I've had. Our default here, if we just click Next, is it will create one single volume or partition. that uses up the entire disk space, and it'll install Windows onto that. Now, some people really like to create separate partitions, and they'll do one partition for the operating system and one partition for their data, or however they choose to break it out. But the typical logic behind this is that it keeps us from filling up our operating system partition with data files. So if your operating system partition fills up completely, you start running into problems with the operating system not being able to function. So that's kind of the drawback here. If I do everything's 50 gigs of space and I download, 40 gigs of data onto this thing, I'm going to run out of space on my operating system volume. In my experience, though, when we divide out the operating system and the data, we tend to underestimate the amount of space that the operating system is going to use. So we'll look ahead and say, all right, Windows 10 is supposed to have, it's supposed to take 10 gigabytes, and we'll just make up some numbers here. It's supposed to take 10 gigabytes, and so if I give it 20, I'll be fine. Well, we tend to underestimate how many things actually have to go on that operating system partition, including, by the way, things like Windows Update downloads. So in my experience, when I've divided those out, the drive that tends, or the partition that tends to fill up first, tends to be my operating system partition. And so I end up running out of room on my operating system partition while I still have plenty of room on my data drive. So if you are going to divide it out, really make sure that you figure out how much space you're going to need for your operating system, and then double it, or triple it at least one more time. It's going to take more than you're anticipating, so make sure you give it plenty of space. Now, in this case, this right here gives us the option, by the way. We can create a new partition, or then we can format one, extend one, delete one, whatever. If we're working with an existing hard drive, so let's say there'd been something on this hard drive before, this is where we could delete our partitions and create new ones and set up our partition table however we wanted to. But if we're just going to do everything all in one shot, all we have to do is click Next. All right. At this point, it's going to start copying Windows files. And from here on, you're not really going to answer any questions until it finishes this phase of the install process and then reboots. So this is actually going to take it a little while because we're going to copy Windows files, we're going to get files ready for installation, then we're going to install features. And really at this point, we can walk away. We've answered all of our questions. We can walk away and we can come back when it's done. And that's what I would tend to do. I would go take a lunch or something. And that worked pretty well. And then I would come back after lunch or something like that to see if my installation was complete. Now, in this case, I am going to go ahead and stop this video. And then I'm going to pick it up again and we'll restart the video when we get past this installation portion and we get to where the installation process is asking us questions again.